So it's my great pleasure actually to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Larry Yee. Just a few important information about Mr. Larry Yee. Larry Yee currently serves as the co-founder and coordinating director for the Food Commons, and today we will probably learn much about the Food Commons, but it's a large national project dedicated to designing and developing a new economic paradigm and whole system approach for regional food. So today will be a lot about food. Just a little bit to Larry's background. He is retired now from the University of California, where he was director of the Ventura County UC Cooperative Extension Office and the UC Hansen Trust. From 1996 to 2000, he worked closely with Dee Hock, which is founder and CEO emeritus of Visa International. So there's some private enterprise experience as well. From 2003 to 2004, Larry was actually appointed to a one-year assignment at USDA, Department of Agriculture, as National Program Leader for Food Marketing Systems and Innovations. Larry is also a past co-chair of the California Roots of Change and a past board member of the Food Alliance. So we really have today an expert on food, and I don't want to take more time away and want to invite you to give the talk about food today. Yeah? So, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I on up there? Oh, yeah, I think so. Very good. Great. Thank you, Wolfgang. Thank you so much for that nice introduction. And yes, I am an old retired guy. You notice, you can tell, we don't wear ties. We shed our coats at the earliest opportunity. Anyway, I am really delighted and honored to be here. And I want to thank Madeline Glickfeld. Is she in the audience? I don't see her, but anyway, she's the one that, she works here at the Institute, and she invited me to speak to all you young, bright students here at UCLA. I guess I should tell you that my daughter graduated from UCLA a few years ago. She graduated in World Arts and Culture. Yes, one of those, great liberal arts majors. And, the world's pretty tough out there right now, which you're soon going to find out, right? When you get out there in the unemployment lines and start looking around. And yes, she did wait on a lot of tables after she graduated. But now she's back in school, and she is studying Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So see, there is hope after UCLA, right? And what's really interesting, as my Food Commons co-conspirator Jim Cochran and I have observed, is that the work of imagining and creating an alternative food system seems to be very attractive, in particular to two age cohorts. The first one, it's old dinosaurs like me, people who grew up in the 60s, who still have this kind of save the world idealism. And we're kind of getting to the end of our game, but we feel like we have a lot of knowledge now and experience to kind of give back. And it's pretty sad, the world that we have left to you young people. I'm actually kind of ashamed that we didn't do a better job. But there are a number of older people like me that are coming to the table and are saying, hey, let's see if we still can't give it one last try. And things like the Food Commons, people are viewing as perhaps a real game changer. And so we have these people that are coming to help us out. And then the other age cohort, which is really coming to us a lot, are young people like yourselves. And it just seems like the young 20-somethings and 30-somethings really just get it. You know that we're in trouble, you know that we're in crises, and you know that the path that we're on is not sustainable. You get it in your gut. And you know that we're going to have to make some serious U-turns in order to have a better future, a viable future for all of you. So it's been interesting to see these two age cohorts coming together to work. You guys have the energy, enthusiasm. We have knowledge and experience, and together, we can perhaps make something like the Food Commons happen. So today I hope to enlighten you a bit, maybe excite you a bit, and maybe even recruit a few of you to come join us. Well, let me first start by just giving you a roadmap of where I'm going to go in the next 45 minutes or so. First, I'm going to give you a little bit more about my own background so you know I didn't just drop in from Mars to do this. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the current food system and why I think it's deeply flawed and unsustainable. And then to talk about the incredible opportunities and potential of local and regional food, which is exploding around the country. And then I'm going to finally dive into the food commons and give you a little bit of background of how that started and some of the fundamental concepts and elements of the food commons, and then to tell you about where we are today, our current status, and our plans for moving forward to bring it into reality. And then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. Yes, Wolfgang? Okay, good. And please watch the time for me, because I haven't timed this little talk here, so if I start to get too far gone, just throw a bottle at me or something, okay? I live in Ojai. How many of you know where Ojai is? Ah, very good. In fact, the picture up on the screen is taken just around, this is from an organic farm, which is just around the corner from where I live. And you know, Ojai is in this, this east-west valley whose natural beauty is truly stunning. In fact, that's what attracts a lot of people there. And right now, you know, it's springtime in the valley and you can smell the orange blossoms everywhere. It's just heavenly. And what's amazing is we are only an hour and a half from downtown Los Angeles, but it seems like we're worlds apart. And 25 years ago, when my wife and I moved to Ojai, there was one stoplight in town. Now there are 4. So we're starting to look like Southern California. And in the last couple of years, I've been spending a lot more time here in your fair city of Los Angeles because I currently serve on the Los Angeles Food Policy Council. And I was just recently appointed by the governor to the Regional Water Board. And Madeline, if she was here, she's also serving on that board, and she's been on the board for a while, and she's really acting as my mentor. It's a big job. So this country boy from Ojai is learning a lot more about Los Angeles. And I've come to know and experience a lot of the wonderful things about the city and the region that frankly I never really cared much about before. But you know something, you got to do something about the traffic here. I mean, the world-class gridlock. I got off the freeway at Wilshire. It took me half an hour to get from there to campus here. It was just unbelievable. But you know, I just recently read that the Southern California Transportation Commission just approved and adopted a new long-range visionary plan that is going to totally shift the paradigm away from the automobile to multiple types of mass transit by the year 2030. And what's truly amazing is that it was passed unanimously by all the 130 plus governmental agencies and municipalities that are represented on the commission. I mean, can you imagine that level of consensus? So, you know, if we can envision this for transportation for Southern California, can we also not imagine a bold, new, and innovative vision for our food system? Absolutely. Can we make a paradigm shift away from the global industrial food system to something more agrarian-based and community-centered, one that would be much better for our health and prosperity? But before I get ahead of myself, let me share a little bit more about my background and build a case for change and transformation. Now, as you heard in the introduction, I had a career with the University of California Cooperative Extension, mostly doing agricultural research and education. And while most of my work for the university centered in Ventura County, I have worked nationally for the last 25 years in sustainable food systems. And I've had several defining moments in my career, but there are 2 that are particularly relevant that I'd like to share with you. The first was in the early 1980s when I was a grad student at Santa Clara University working on an MBA in agribusiness. They They had a new Institute of Agribusiness there, and there were only 2 places in the country at the time that you could actually get an MBA with an emphasis in agribusiness. One was Santa Clara, and the other was Harvard. And the director of the institute, Eric Thor, who was a noted agricultural economist at the time, every day he would walk in the class and he'd say, now students, never forget, in the food system that we have, farmers are price takers. It's the way it always was, the way it always will be. Now, do you know what I mean by that? Farmers are price takers. What it means is that farmers don't participate in setting the price for the products that they produce. The system does that for them. That is, unless you are a farmer that goes to a farmer's market, right? And through direct marketing, you can set your prices. But generally speaking, farmers are price takers. That's the way the economic system works in the food system. Well, he would do this every time he came to class, and it's just like kind of beating some kind of universal truth into us all the time. And there's enough rebel in me that I started to question this. Why are farmers price takers in this food system? Why can't they have a voice in setting prices for the products? Why do farmers always get the short end of the stick? Why does the food system have to be this way? We created the system. Why can't we change it? Just to illustrate an example of this, I have a friend in Ventura County. He's an orange grower. Small orchard, he has about 40 acres. He came to me a few years ago and he said, Larry, it cost me $250,000, $250,000 to produce my crop this year. He says, do you know what I got in return from Sunkist? Most of the orange growers market through Sunkist. It's a huge marketing cooperative. The growers just bring their oranges down to Sunkist, and Sunkist, takes it from there and markets them worldwide. He says, well, this year I got a check for $1.99. $1.99, and it cost him $250,000 to bring his crop in. Now, how many years, you don't have to be a smart businessman to know that, a few years of that, and, that's it. In fact, that's what's happened to oranges in Ventura County. We used to have 20,000 acres of oranges. Now, and in a very short period of time, we're down to about 2. And steadily, over the last 50 years, many farmers, especially small and medium-sized, have been squeezed out of business, forced by the competition of larger and larger scale operations trying to eke out slim margins from the hugely demanding commodity markets. So here's a little history. In the 1930s, we had the most number of farms ever in this country. There were over 7 million farms in the country. How many are there today? There are slightly over 2 million farms in the country. And if you look at some of the latest statistics for the past 3 or 4 years, you'll actually see an increase in the number of farms in this country. But take a closer look. And where is that increase coming from? It's coming from the small farms. In fact, they're so small, they're just hobby farms. And most of the small farmers in this country are not getting their total family income from the farm. Most of them, get it from off-farm sources. And if you look at the structure of farms in this country now, you would also see a slight increase in the large farms, the big agribusinesses. And they make up approximately 20% of the farms in this country, but they produce approximately 80% of our food. And you know what? Most of those large farmers aren't really farmers. They're just independent contractors to the big food corporations. 50% of the cropland in the United States is dedicated to corn and soybeans. And much of that is used for what? Animal feed, okay? For meat production. Only 3% of the cropland in this country is used for fruits and vegetables. So what happened to all the mid-sized family farms, the 5 million or so that disappeared from 1930 on. Well, they're gone. And those are the farms that you have in your idyllic mind's eye. You know, the farms, you know, the silo and the red barns and the beautiful countryside, gone. And if you think this was simply the natural curve of evolution and competition, you'd be wrong. There has been deliberate and intentional plans at the highest levels of business and government in this country to reduce the number of farms and to minimize the number of farmers. In 1962, the Adaptive Plan for Agriculture report was released, and it called for the elimination of 2 million farmers. This was a high-level commission populated by captains of industry. In fact, it was chaired by the then CEO of Ford Motors. And they concluded that farmers were, and this is a quote from the report, farmers were an excess resource, and that they needed to be eliminated. At least 2 million of them needed to be eliminated. They even went so far, I mean, after they finished this report, they went around to a lot of the high schools, especially throughout the Midwest, and told kids, hey, don't become farmers. Don't go into farming. It's scut work. It's dirty work. It's dead-end street. Go to college. Go to the cities. Go to work in industry. Get off the farm. So there has been, as I said, a deliberate, intentional plan in this country to reduce the number of farmers and small to medium-sized family farms. The second defining period for me in my career was in 1996 when I took a year's sabbatical leave and spent that year with D. Hawk. Do any of you know who D. Hawk is? No. Do any of you carry the Visa card? D. Hawk was the founder of Visa. He's in the Business Hall of Fame, of course. And if you go back and look at the history of how Visa was created, back in the 1960s, all the big financial institutions, banks and so on, they were all trying to develop their credit card operations, and they were all failing miserably, losing millions and gazillions of dollars. And the banks came together, I think it was probably 1966 or 67. They called a meeting, they said, my God, what are we going to do? What can we do about this? And D. Hawk was the vice president of a small bank in Seattle. He was there. He got appointed to a committee to help figure out, you know, how all these banks were going to deal with their credit card problems. They formed a committee, and that committee worked for 2 years, really hard, and created the Visa system. And then D. Hawk became the CEO of Visa, and for the next 15 years, grew it out. And totally burned himself out. I mean, did the Visa thing for 24/7 for 15 years, and then he retired to a beautiful ranch just south of Half Moon Bay. You know where Half Moon Bay is? Up by San Francisco. Beautiful ranch up by Half Moon Bay, and hung out there for 10 years, driving tractors, pushing cattle around, so on, just hanging out. And then people who knew of his organizational genius, you see, D. Hawk was more than a banker or a credit card person. He was really an organizational genius. If you look at the way Visa is structured and the way it's organized, it's very different. It's a membership operation, okay? All the financial institutions that participate in Visa are members of Visa. And it's actually very democratic. They all participate. The 25,000 plus financial institutions participate in the decision-making process. Anyway, people who knew of his organizational genius urged him to come out of retirement, to share his ideas with the world. And it's a long story, but I ended up catching up with him about that point and worked with him as he was coming out of retirement for a year, kind of like an apprentice. As he would work with various groups around the country, I just kind of tagged along and helped him as best I could. And then after a while, he would push me off on my own, and I would work with groups. And he would try to help existing organizations restructure themselves or help to create new organizations in new and different ways, because he believed that the way our businesses and organizations are structured no longer work in the kind of environment that we find ourselves in the 21st century. In fact, he would always tell people that what we're experiencing, not just in this country, but throughout the world, is massive institutional failure. And what did he mean by that? What he meant was we still have these huge institutions, whether they be government or major corporations or whatever, huge institutions that are sucking up massive resources, and they are no longer relevant to our challenges and the opportunities in working for a better future. There's a quote, one of my favorite quotes from D. Hawk. It goes like this: "In times such as these, it is no failure to fall short of realizing all that we might dream. The failure is to fall short of dreaming all that we might realize." So that was an incredible year for me, and toward the end of that year, we actually went to work with the Kellogg Foundation. The Kellogg Foundation in the 1990s had this major initiative. They put $40 million into supporting sustainable ag projects around the country. And Dee and I worked with the Kellogg Foundation to try to create a national organization for all these sustainable ag organizations and projects. And we launched that new organization in 2000. It really didn't get off the ground. People didn't understand the new structure, the value proposition, and so on. But that was the springboard to another organization that I worked on called the Association of Family Farms. And we started that in about 2002. And I worked on that and some other things. And anyway, that all kind of led up to my work on the Food Commons. So the Food Commons really is a culmination of a lot of stuff I've done in the past, all brought forward and all brought together. But before I get into the Food Commons, let me just talk a little bit about our current food system. Okay? You know, every day in life, we're faced with both challenges and opportunities. But now I believe that we are at a special time in our history on this planet, one in which there are extraordinary challenges and opportunities. And nowhere is this more true than our current industrial food system. Sure, it's given us the illusion of cheap, plentiful food, and they've made food fast and convenient, fulfilling the mantra of any food, anywhere, anytime. But let me tell you, there are a lot of sick chickens now coming home to roost. Our environment has been terribly degraded, massive soil erosion, pesticide pollution, loss of biodiversity. In fact, the complete loss of whole ecosystems. If you ask Wolfgang about that, I'm sure he can tell you. We've lost the prairies of the Midwest, many of the rainforests and the Amazon. Look at all the rivers that have been dammed up. And now with climate change, the list is becoming long and deep. Our health has been compromised, not just our personal health, but our community health. Obesity, diabetes, chronic diseases, heart disease, and cancer, many of these things are diet-related. Have any of you been watching the latest HBO series, which is on right now this week, called The Weight of the Nation? No? Okay, well, turn on the tube, turn it on to HBO, and watch The Weight of the Nation. It's all about the obesity epidemic going on in this country. You know, the truth is, we are what we eat. Did any of you see the documentary came out maybe 3 or 4 years ago called King Corn? Yes, a few are here, okay. This was a documentary done by 2 young filmmakers. It kind of came out about the same time as Michael Pollan's The Omnivore's Dilemma. And what these two young filmmakers wanted to do was just kind of follow corn throughout the whole food system. And so what they did was they went to Iowa and they got a farmer to let them use an acre, and they grew a corn crop and harvested and followed it all the way through. But before they did this, they took a road trip around the country. They took a month-long road trip, okay? And they ate at places that were really convenient right off the road. So you know it was just a lot of fast food places, right? And at the end of the month, they came back to a laboratory on the East Coast where they had their hair analyzed. I don't know if you know, but whatever you eat actually shows up in your hair, okay? So why am I losing all this? So they had their hair analyzed, and in the film, it shows them sitting down with the lab director, and the lab director is saying to them, well, okay, we've analyzed your hair. You guys are corn. So, you know, if you follow corn, corn is in everything that we eat. So if you get a chance to watch King Corn, you should watch that. It's a good documentary. But you know, then there's all the social inequities of our food system, the huge issues of food access and security, and plus the plight of farm workers and food workers, and the fact that our rural communities have been decimated and boarded up. Tracy McMillan just wrote a book called The American Way of Eating. She's a writer that went undercover, and she worked as a farm worker in the Central Valley and then up in the Salinas Valley. And then she went to work for Walmart for a while in the produce department. And then after that, she went to work for Applebee's, working in the kitchen. And it's quite revealing when what she writes about and what's happening behind the scenes, you know, in our food system. So the only reason why our food is relatively cheap at the grocery counter is because all of the costs that I have just listed have been externalized, and the system is heavily subsidized. In truth, our food is very expensive, and we are literally paying for it with our lives. You know, just the health costs of obesity are staggering. It's now in the hundreds of billions of dollars and rising. And from this film, the documentary, The Weight of the Nation, 42% of you are going to be obese by the year 2030. Now, what is obese? If you're 5'6", you are obese if you weigh 250 pounds, thereabouts. Okay? I'm 5'10", so, you know, throw another 60 pounds on top of me, you know, that's what, but 42% are going to be obese if we don't do something about it by the year 2030. Further, the global industrial food system is tightly controlled by a few large corporations, and in the past few years, there has been tremendous consolidation, concentration, and centralization. And to illustrate, let me digress for a minute and put the spotlight on animal agriculture. So I'm going to read you some statistics, and I'm going to read them slowly so you can just kind of, you know, digest this and get the picture. In 1950, we had 392 million hens that produced 10 billion eggs. 392 million, 10 billion eggs. In 2000, we had 270 million layers that were producing 82 billion eggs. In 1950, there were a little over 3 million hog operations, and we slaughtered 69 million hogs. So remember, back in the 1950s, this is still when we had a whole mess of small to medium-sized farm operations in the country. So 3 million hog operations, and we slaughtered 69 million. In 2000, there were only 65,000 hog operations, and we slaughtered 109 million. In 1950, we had 21 million dairy cows producing 116 billion pounds of milk. In 2000, we had 9 million dairy cows, but they produced 167 billion pounds of milk. You know, if this trend continues, you just have one big giant dairy cow, you know, sitting in the middle of the country with big old pipes just going from its udder out to the different parts of the country, right? In standard economic theory, a market stops being competitive when the 4 largest players control over 40%. This is known as 4 firm concentration ratio, okay? So in the beef industry, the 4 top beef producers, packers, control 83.5% of the industry. In pork, the 4 top control 66%. In broiler chickens, the 4 top ones, 58.5%. You know, that's Tyson. You ever heard of Tyson? Pilgrim's Pride. In turkeys, the 4 top control 55%. And then you might be interested in soybean crushing, the 4 top soybean crushers. You know, that's how we get animal feed, control 80% of the whole industry. So industrialization has been driven by efficiency and profits, which I believe now borders on insanity and sheer greed. And I wish that more Americans could simply tour one of the thousands of confined hog operations in the Midwest and see the suffering of these animals and the oceans of waste being dumped into the environment. They are literally concentration camps for animals. So I'm going to ask you, do you want to consume protein from an animal that has literally suffered its entire life? Well, that's what we're doing. And recently I was completely astounded when I read that scientists have proposed using the tools of biotechnology to eliminate the gene that causes pain in animals, so animals raised in these CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, will not suffer. Now, how far are we going to push this scientific industrialization of our food system? This is lunacy. So Michael Pollan, you all know who Michael Pollan is. He's the rock star food writer. Was asked, if there's one thing that you could do to restore agriculture to being more sustainable and healthy, what would you wish for? And he said, return animals to family farms. And I would add to that, let's put the farmers back on the land as well. Let's repeal that 1962 adaptive plan for agriculture. And by returning animals to family farms, it's not only healthy for the ecosystem of that farm, but we restore dignity and husbandry and the raising of animals for food. And yes, they are happier. How am I doing for time? Oh, there's a clock up there. Thanks. And we can easily achieve all of this, the changes, if we simply recreate the thousands and thousands of diversified family farms serving their bioregional locavores and the necessary infrastructure to efficiently get that food to our tables. So if our current industrial food system isn't working, then what does an alternative look like, and how do we do it? So let me shift now and just tell you what I think is the incredible opportunity and potential for local and regional food. In Southern California, the 10 counties of Southern California, from Kern County south down to the Mexican border, we all consume $57 billion of food a year, $57 billion of food. But do you know less than 1% of that food comes from this region itself? And this is one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world. In fact, Los Angeles County used to be the top grossing ag producer in the whole country. That's back when there were many small dairies in the Los Angeles basin before people moved in and pushed them out. There was a recent report done called the 25% Shift Report. It was a report about the Cleveland area. They did an economic analysis mostly focused on the food sector around Cleveland. They took the 16 counties around Cleveland and Cleveland itself, and they did this big analysis. And then they asked the question, if we could make a major shift and source 25% of our food from this region itself, what difference would that make? And they concluded that it would create 27,000 new jobs, and it would increase the economic output of that region by 4.2 billion. Now, USDA, the Ag Marketing Service, they just came out with the report and said that local and regional food totaled about $5 billion in 2008. Now that's, I think, what's called the farm gate value. That's the value of the products leaving the farm, okay? If you add the multiplier effect to that, then it's probably, $15 to $20 billion of local regional food economy. Now in the food commons, we project by the year 2020, local regional food could be 100 billion, easily. So how do we close that gap between 5 billion and 100 billion? Well, I'm going to talk about that in a second. They also did a consumer preference study and found out that 86% of the respondents preferred local food and checked very important or somewhat important about shopping at stores that carried local food. There was an MIT Columbia study that was looking at kind of the structural dimensions around obesity. It was a $2 million research study funded by United Health. And after this exhaustive study, they concluded that one thing that would really, really help solve the problem of obesity in this country would be to create more local and regional food systems. And Time magazine on its cover, I don't know, a couple years ago, said local is the new organic. And organic food has grown steadily by 20% a year for the last 25 years. So the opportunity is enormous. The time is right, people are ready. How do you close this gap between 5 billion and 100 billion? And you're not going to do that by just starting a few more farmers markets here and there, okay? In fact, in 2006, if you added up the sales of all the farmers markets in this country, it added up to about one Walmart supercenter. Of course, it's been growing since then. Okay, what time is it now? 1/4 after. It's time to talk about the food commons, right? All right, a little bit of background about the food commons. I get carried away when I start thinking about where we are with our whole food system and what we need to change. As Wolfgang said, I have served on the Roots of Change Council here in California. What's the Roots of Change Council? It was a group that was started by a number of West Coast foundations. And these foundations were trying to figure out how they could pool their philanthropy and help create a more sustainable food system in California. And so they created this war chest of about $4 million. They formed this council, and I was one of the founding members of that council back in 2002. And we set about creating what we called the vivid picture, which was our vision of a sustainable food system in California by the year 2030. And I became good friends with Jim Cochran, who also served on the Rock Council. He's the first organic strawberry farm, commercial organic strawberry farmer in California, 30 years ago, back when they said it couldn't be done. Well, he did it. And he has a fabulous operation just north of Santa Cruz, right on the coast. And he's known throughout the organic food world. I mean, he's a real rock star. Anyway, he and I have had long conversations about, you know, if we were czars, how would we change the food system, blah, blah, blah. And then with all the work that we did on the Roots of Change Council, when the recession hit in 2008, Jim and I looked at each other and we said, you know, we have to do something. We got to quit just talking about this. So we pulled together a small team of people from around the country, and we came out with our first concept paper for the Food Commons. This was issued in January of 2010. Just a short little concept paper. And we shipped it out to a lot of our friends around the country, and we got a really incredible response. We thought, you know, maybe we're onto something. So after that, we set up meetings and started to talk to a lot of people and so on, and worked for the course of about a year. And in October of this last year, we issued this concept paper. This is our Food Commons 2.0. And this is really our blueprint for how to create a national system for local and regional food in this country. And we've been getting a tremendous response from this ever since. So let me share with you about the Food Commons before my time is up here. This is really what it's all about, this quote from Bucky Fuller. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So what is the Food Commons? The Food Commons is an agrarian-based, community-centered food system that is locally owned and operated and is connected both regionally and nationally. It's an alternative food system that provides the physical, the financial, and organizational infrastructure for local, regional food systems to allow them to thrive and be sustained in perpetuity. And it's really a big business development project. That's all it is. You know, people tell us, wow, you know, this is a big, ambitious, bold, innovative thing you're thinking about here. You know, you're crazy, you can't do that. But you know, every day people come up with big development ideas, right? New high-rise office buildings get built and so on. How did the Panama Canal get built? How did the highway system in this country get built? Because someone had to sit down and think about it and design it. I won't spend too much time on this slide, but so you can just see, I just was kind of comparing, you know, the industrial, our current global industrial food system with a more agrarian-based food system like the Food Commons. There are three trends that have come together that really gave rise to the Food Commons. One is the local food movement that I've been talking about. Another is this thing called agriculture of the middle. This is where people around the country are concerned about the disappearance of the mid-sized family farms that I talked about, okay? And then this whole new economy movement. You know, the big wake-up call that happened, you know, in 2008 when the recession started was, hold it here. You know, the economic paradigm that we've been following for a long time just, you know, is bringing us to the brink of maybe we have to rethink things. You know, it's kind of predicated on if you can maximize your wealth, you can maximize your happiness. And if you think about that for 2 seconds, you know it's a bunch of baloney. But that's how the whole thing has been built. Growth, maximizing profits, consumption, okay? So now there's a lot of people that are thinking about a whole new kind of ecological economy. These three things have come together and really moved the whole Food Commons concept along. We don't have time, so I'm not going to go into this. This is an important slide, actually, but I don't have time to really go into that. Let me just bump along here. So this shows you the growth potential for local and regional food. So here we are, 2011, and in our paper we were saying that, local regional food might be a $10 billion part of the food economy right now. The food economy is $1 trillion. And if it steadily grows like we think it's going to grow, then by the year 2020, it could be $100 billion. But again, how are we going to get there from here to there, okay? We have to create infrastructure. We have to recreate food systems like we had 75 and 100 years ago. These are the three core elements of the food commons. A food commons hub, a food commons trust, and a food commons bank. And if you study economics, you know that all economic systems treat three fundamental elements: land, labor, capital. Land, labor, capital, okay? So you can think of the hub, our food hub, as labor. You can think of the trust as land. You can think of the bank as capital. So what's a food hub? If we're going to get local food to our tables, you have to have a way to aggregate that food, to bring it in from all of the small to medium-sized family farms in the region, aggregate it, and then redistribute it out. And that's how, the big industrial food system works. All these food wholesalers and distribution companies, that's essentially what they do. Well, we're going to have to do that, recreate that for local food, regional food. There's a lot of other things that could happen at this food hub. You could have a public market. You could have business incubators. You could have health and wellness centers. You could have all kinds of things associated with that hub. The Food Commons Trust is an interesting idea. It's really very similar to a land trust, if you know what that is. But our idea is there's a lot, well, we went through the subprime, debacle when the recession hit. There's still a lot of toxic commercial property on the books of big banks throughout this country. And we think that could be the next big shoe that drops that could take us over the brink. There's billions, if not trillions of dollars of commercial property that's underwater. Office buildings, land, so on, they're just lying there, okay? Our thought is to create a national trust where we could put this property, both land and buildings and so on, into a trust that we could then use in support of local food systems. One of the biggest things that prevents young people like yourself from getting into farming is the cost of farmland. It's very expensive. So if we could have a Food Commons Trust that could hold the property and lease it to you, then we think that's a great way to go. And then the Food Commons Bank is a whole new way to finance and invest in these local food enterprises. All of you know the Green Bay Packers? Who owns the Green Bay Packers? You know? The citizens of Green Bay. It's not some fat cat gazillionaire that owns the Green Bay Packers. The community of Green Bay owns the Green Bay Packers. It's some kind of nonprofit foundation they've set up. It's very innovative and so on. But that's our idea for a food commons, a local food commons. We're going to start the first prototype of the food commons in Fresno. So imagine, the Fresno food commons being owned by the people of Fresno. Lots and lots, thousands of small investors, $100, $500, owning a piece of the local food enterprise. So this just shows you a little bit more about what I've just been describing. This is the supply side of the food system. So these represent, a whole bunch of diversified small to medium-sized farm operations. This is the demand side. So these are retail stores and hospitals and restaurants and schools and whatnot. The color red indicates that these are owned by the Food Commons Trust. So see, all the product flows through the regional food hub and then gets redistributed out. And then the bank operates, to finance the whole thing. So we believe that a Food Commons food system would offer every community the following. And I won't, in the interest of time, I won't go down through that too much. I'll just move on here. We also have a governance system figured out for this whole Food Commons, a national governance system, and how decisions are going to get made, how policies are going to get set, and so on. So these are the phases of creating a Food Commons. To first imagine it, and that's what we've done here. The next thing to do is to actually design it, to do feasibility studies and business plans, and then finally to build it. So in summary, we believe the Food Commons is a breakthrough strategy because it's an integrative whole systems approach to regional food. We think it's a viable antidote to the unsustainable path that we are currently on. It marries critical elements of real property, capital, and governance with value chain infrastructure. It proposes new cooperative entrepreneurial structures of ownership, along with management strategies of the commons. It is a new economic paradigm based on natural wealth and ecological limits to growth, and it puts forth new ways for people and communities to prosper and flourish. We believe that the Food Commons has the potential to be a major foundation for economic vitality and a magnet for a new generation of innovators who need guidance, access to capital, and a physical place to put their energy and creativity to work. We also believe that this system can revitalize and ensure the continuity of small and mid-sized farms that steward the land, nourish our communities and our health, and comprise the fundamental building blocks of local and national food security. And we recognize that creating this new system is a massive undertaking. It's an entrepreneurial effort of unprecedented scale, and it's based on a model that is new to a lot of people. But we believe that now is the time. In fact, ask yourself the question, if not this, what? If not us, who? And if not now, when? Very briefly, where we are with the status of the Food Commons is we have applied to foundations for funding to get us started in the first phase of development. And I can't wait to get back to my email because today we were supposed to hear from the Schmidt Family Foundation. Do you know the Schmidt Family Foundation? It's Google. And we're hoping that they're going to be a lead foundation to begin to fund the development of the Food Commons. We're putting together a leadership team, an executive leadership team that can make a lot of this possible. It has the capacity, experience, and knowledge to bring this together. I told you we're developing our first prototype in Fresno, and there are a number of other communities that we're in serious conversation with that are very interested. Seattle, Atlanta, Raleigh, Little Rock, Hawaii, the Great Lakes region, and so on. And what's interesting is we just took this thing and sent it out, to a lot of our friends via email, and this thing has gone viral. And people call me up every day or email me every day saying, hey, I got a copy of your Food Commons. I'm really interested. Let's talk. So we're just really pleased at the response that we're getting. We're also working to develop the national support structures, the trust and the bank and so on. And we're working, of course, to just continue to broadcast the idea and what we're learning from how we're doing it. And finally, to just have fun with it all. So I'm going to end with a quote from Denise Willey. Quite literally, the molecules that were once our food become the structure and function of our human form. They were born in a tiny seed, nurtured in a bed of clay, fed by the light of a star. The clay is ancient, the light is now, intimacy with the food is our future. Thank you very much.